There was an old, sprawling house at the edge of town, hidden behind towering oak trees and thick vines that seemed to wrap around its walls like snakes. It was the kind of house people whispered about but never really talked about out loud. A place left to the elements and perhaps to something else. The house had once been a grand estate built by a wealthy family generations ago, but the family was long gone now, and the house had fallen into decay. The windows were boarded up, and the front door hung loosely on its rusted hinges, but even in its current state, there was something about the house that made people look away whenever they passed by. For years, it stood empty. No one dared to go inside, not even to explore or vandalize it. The few who had tried didn't talk about what they saw. They just left, pale and shaking, and never returned. That was until a local photographer with a passion for documenting old, abandoned places, decided he was going to explore the house. He had heard all the stories, but he didn't believe in ghosts or curses. To him, the house was just another building, waiting to be captured through his lens. One cloudy afternoon, with his camera in hand, he approached the house. The air was thick and still. The only sound was the rustling of leaves. He pushed open the front door, which creaked loudly in protest, and stepped inside. The smell of damp wood and dust hit him immediately. The floorboards groaned under his weight as he walked through the grand yet decayed foyer. He started taking pictures. The cracked walls, the broken chandelier that hung precariously from the ceiling, the peeling wallpaper with its faded floral patterns. But as he ventured further into the house, something felt wrong. The air grew colder, and the atmosphere seemed to thicken, as if the house was watching him. He brushed it off as nerves. He wasn't the type to scare easily. Still, the deeper he went into the house, the quieter it became. It was as if the house was swallowing all sound, leaving only his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. He found himself drawn to a particular room at the far end of the second floor. The door was slightly ajar, and it felt as though something was waiting for him inside. Without thinking, he pushed the door open and stepped into the room. The room was unlike the rest of the house. It was almost untouched by time. The furniture was still intact, covered in a thin layer of dust, but otherwise preserved. A large, ornate mirror hung on the wall, reflecting the dim light that filtered through the cracked window. But what really caught his attention was the silence. It wasn't just quiet, it was complete and utter silence. No creaking floors, no rustling wind, not even the faint hum of life outside. It was as if the room existed in a void, cut off from the rest of the world. He raised his camera to take a picture, but as he did, he caught movement in the corner of his eye. He lowered the camera and turned toward the mirror. For a moment, he thought he saw a figure standing behind him. A woman, dressed in a long, old-fashioned gown, her face pale and expressionless. But when he spun around, the room was empty. His heart raced as he looked back at the mirror. The woman was still there, standing behind him, closer now. Her eyes were hollow, her mouth slightly open as if she were about to speak, but no sound came. He tried to move, but he couldn't. His legs felt like they were rooted to the floor. Suddenly, the silence was broken by a low, whispering sound, like wind passing through cracks in the walls. But the whispering wasn't coming from the walls, it was coming from the woman in the mirror. Her lips moved, forming words that he couldn't quite make out. Panic surged through him as he struggled to pull himself away from the mirror. He stumbled backward, his camera falling to the floor with a loud thud, the sound echoing unnaturally in the otherwise silent room. The whispering grew louder, more insistent, filling his ears until it was all he could hear. He couldn't take it anymore. With a final desperate effort, he turned and bolted out of the room, crashing through the hallway and down the stairs, not daring to look back. He didn't stop running until he was outside, gasping for breath. The house loomed behind him, silent and still, as if nothing had happened. But he knew better. He had seen her, the woman in the mirror. Later that night, when he finally returned home, he tried to shake the feeling of dread that clung to him. He sat down to review the pictures on his camera, hoping to prove to himself that it was just his imagination. But when he scrolled through the images, he froze. Every single photo he had taken in the house was gone, replaced by a single image. It was the woman, staring directly at him through the mirror, her hand reaching out as if to pull him back inside. The last thing he heard before the silence took over completely was a faint whisper, echoing from the depths of his mind. "Come back." And from that day forward, Ben never spoke of the house again. But those who saw him said he was never the same. His once bright eyes were dull, and he always seemed to be listening for something that only he could hear. The house on the edge of town remained as it was, waiting for the next soul to wander in, waiting in silence, like it always had, like it always would. Thanks for watching this video, and subscribe to my channel for more videos.